taking 20 meters.
Yeah.
Okay. We're all good to go now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, welcome, Mr. Heil. We're glad to have you. Thank you very much for joining us this evening with the York County Amateur Radio Society.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate being here, and we'll get things rocking. My whole life started in 1952. I was 12 years old, and my parents bought me a Hammond organ, B3 Hammond organ. It was a lot of money in those days, and they weren't wealthy people, but my mother thought I should have that. But the interesting thing, I tell you this, across the street in St. Louis, where I took my organ lessons, was Walter Ash Radio. And I would go over there and spend some time and see all the knobs and all the stuff going on. And fast forward that to 1956, and I became a ham. I had to have it. And one of my high school chums had gotten a license, so I followed him, and away we went. Had a Harvey Wells TBS 50D, and that Harvey Wells is still with me. I use it quite often in the morning. It's right down there on the console over there. I'm on AM every morning for weekdays, and I use the Harvey Wells, and it got me really stirred up. The other thing it did, though, you'll notice in that picture over on the left, I wish it was a wider shot, is a little homebrew 2E26 6-meter rig. I built it from what I had read in QST, and Doug DeMaw, one of his little projects. And I really got into building very early, and that really helped me to do what I do today. But also at that same time, I became a professional organist. At the age of 14, I was playing in a restaurant. I had a 1954 Plymouth convertible. Now, I was only 15 years old, but I had a very special license that allowed me to drive it to work. And I drove about 15 miles, but it was really cool. And the same year, a year later from that, I got a job at the Fox Theater in St. Louis as a substitute organist at the Fox. Now, why I tell you all this is that really changed my life, because I learned to listen. We had to voice and tune about 3,500 pipes from 1 inch to 32 foot. Organ hadn't been played in 20 years. Stan Can was the organist there. He was a very famous organist in the Midwest. He took me under his wing, and wow, it was just wonderful. I learned how to listen. Listening is something not a lot of people do. They only hear. Listening is mentally dissecting what you hear, and that taught me how to do that. One day, I get a call from Paul Klipsch. Paul was a legend. He actually was the father of the folded horn. And he was a pioneer of the high fidelity audio. And he'd heard about some of the things that I was doing. I was building some PA systems, and he wanted to see them. So he flew up to my hometown in Marissa, Illinois. And all day long, well, why did you do that? Well, how did you do this? How come? Where'd you learn it? Ham radio. No, where did you go to school? Ham radio. And I got that a lot during my career. People would ask me, where'd you go to school? Well, I barely made it through high school because I was playing the organ, making a lot of money as a kid. So I didn't need all of that. But I did graduate, but poorly. But Paul he was really interested in what was going on with all I was doing. And that into that day, why he put me in his airplane, and we flew back to Hope, Arkansas. And then the next day or so, we visited his station lab. That's where he learned or taught all this stuff to us. He was building folded horns and all kinds of things that he was known for. But he took me under his wing. How blessed I was. And he didn't teach it to me that particular day, but he guided it to me. Now, you want to do this. You want to learn this. And he was referring me to the idea factory of the 1920s. Bell Labs was the consolidation of AT&T and Western Electric. Western was the manufacturing arm of the Bell system. They had 4,000 scientists and engineers assigned to this newly created Bell telephone lab. They were fully dedicated to researching how the human ear worked and what audio frequencies were most important to understand the spoken word. Well, what's all this about? It was pretty simple. They put the telephone system together. And when they did, they 2 wires from New Jersey all the way out to the West Coast. And every 50 miles across the states was a relay station. It kept the frequency up, kept the level up. Everything was flat. Good. And when they got it all connected and hooked up, everything was looking good across all of the different relay stations. What happened? Well, this is what happened. Let me change microphones here. It was very discerning to them because what they heard was this. There was no articulation. It was all very bassy, quite mushy. Nothing like they would put to the input, like what happened here? And so they brought in the 2 lead guys who happened to be Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson. Harvey and Weldon were miracle workers. They figured out what the problem was, why it sounded so bad. It was the human ear. We don't hear flat. We don't hear nowhere close to flat. And certain frequencies need more a level than others. You'll notice that graph. It's a very famous graph, the Fletcher-Munson curve. You'll notice up at the top at about 110 dB, it's almost flat. That's why kids like to listen to their music loud. We just give them a lot of nonsense about it. No, they hear all the cymbals, all the bass, all the vocals, everything's there. But down here where you're listening tonight at 20 dB, look at that. Looks like a ride at Disneyland. And what they discovered was the telephone system, first of all, was from around 300 to 3,000 cycles. But at 2.5K, magic happened. And that magic was all about articulation. And what'll happen here, I will take out one thing out of my equalization curve. I'm not turning anything else. I'm not touching the bass. I'm not touching anything but that mid-range 2.5. Listen intently when I take it out. And when it's gone, what happened? The F and the S, the essence of sound, it's simply not there. So I'm going to bring it back. All I'm doing is bringing back 2.5K. Here we go. All of a sudden, we now have the essence. We have the syllables. The syllables are really articulate. And that's what they had to do to the telephone system. But wait a minute. How are they going to do that? Because once they figured this out, how are we going to do this? We're talking 1920, folks. And so the equalizer was born. And the term equalizer, it had its origins in those early telephone experiments when, of course, the losses of mids and highs were over the long lines. They had to be corrected along with it. In the audio spectrum of the sound at the receiving end, we had to be able to match that to the sound that was initially transmitted. And so how would you do that? They didn't, the word equalizer did not have a place then. Nobody had ever heard of it. But they did know how to build high pass and low pass filters. So what they would do is they would take the input from the telephone, full range, put it through a capacitor. On the other side of it to take a resistor to ground. And there's the formula if you ever wanted to figure it out. With the right capacitor and the right resistor, you could pass whatever frequencies you want. Also had to build a low pass filter to get rid of those stupid lows. And that was kind of the reverse. Signal went through the resistor, but the highs went to ground. Now, there again, you didn't want to take all of them there. Well, there was this genius kid. He was very young, John Volkmann, and he worked for RCA in the 1920s. And his job was in the motion picture industry. The silence were starting to go out in the last of the 20s, and they could see that there was going to be the audio. So he had to devise a system and choose what kind of filters he needed. And this is a very rough draft of what he did. He built a couple of low pass filters, a couple of high pass filters, and he could switch them in or out. And in doing that, could figure out what to make all these things sound great. And of course, he discovered early that it was going to be 2.5K. Now, all of this means a lot to you guys and gals because our ham radios didn't have any equalization for a long time. And I was working in the PA market with all these rock groups back in the late 60s through the 70s, part of the 80s. And I had to do something because there was no equalization for me either. It wasn't out there. And you think, well, yeah, there were. No, there wasn't. In the 1970s, the systems did not have equalization. Well, I had heard about Langevin. Langevin was a company that built studio mixers. And so I bought one of the studio mixers and I put it together, and oh man, this really brought things around for me because everybody was starting to hear about this guy in Marissa, Illinois that had a soldering iron. And I was doing things that wasn't been happening by then. And one of the things I did with Langevin's mixer that I had purchased, they had the first equalizer. This is 1968. And it's like, whoa. Right before that, in 67, they built what was absolutely the first production EQ. And it had slide control, and up at the top was a switch that we could switch from different frequencies, 5K, 3K, 1K, so on, and 2.5K. And then you could plus or minus that. Well, then the next year they said, aha, we can do this with a graphic. And you can understand how incredible that was for all of us in the audio business, that we had a graphic equalizer. And then shortly after that, here comes the parametric equalizer. And that was done by John Flickinger. And he did that back in 72. But it was just an unbelievable thing to have equalizers. That's a 3-band parametric. We'll come back to that in a little bit, but notice those 3 equalizers, they each had 3 controls. So there's 9 controls in a parametric versus some of the other equals. You already had it set. The frequencies were set for you. All you had to do was plus or minus it, boost or cut. And so the parametric became really popular with all of us in the PA business, as well as the broadcasters. Every broadcaster in the world has a SYMETRIX 528E. But you see, take those 3 filters. We had one control for frequency, There, that one's set at about 140 on the low end. The octave, that means the bandwidth of that filter, there it is at about 2 octaves wide. And then that was cut. I don't want any bass, or I don't want a lot of it, so you cut it. The next one, the frequency set at 2.5K and about four octaves of bandwidth. But look at it, we plus that like crazy. And then for the broadcast, we need it up at 6.8K. And so that's how a parametric works. You were the engineer and you had to adjust the frequency, the bandwidth, and boost to cut. And we could also go in and shape that bandwidth. That was very important. That's what the octaves are. The red shows you pretty wide, and then a narrower one would be the green, and then the narrow one would be the blue. So all of this was really coming on to me quickly in the sound system market. We were doing everybody from the Grateful Dead to Dolly Parton, and it just went on and on and on. And of course, Joe Walsh. And that's a story in its own. I'd love to come back some night and spend the whole night. That's quite a story about all of that. Well, I was off the air for about 12 years. And I came back on the air, hadn't heard anything, listened to anything. I come back and I'm going, what happened to my great Art Collins audio? Because when I left there, it was pretty good. Yeah, it was articulate, wasn't mushy, wasn't bassy. Well, that's because his filters were only 2.1 wide. So he really did put the emphasis on the articulation and knocking out all that low end. It's what I'm going, we got to do something about this. And so what I did is I built the very first equalizer that all of amateur radio had seen. I built it for me, but I'd have people come to the station and we'd play and they'd hear me on the air and they'd want to come and see it. It was called the EQ200. It was a little 2-band equalizer. And I never knew what was in front of me. You never know what the future brings sometimes. But I wrote an article for QST. They accepted it. And the editor called me and said, this is a revelation. This is going to be something very special for the magazine. Okay, thank you. Well, I didn't actually realize it was the first, but it was. And I did a do-it-yourself, had all the nice schematics and the parts list. But I made a mistake. I put my phone number in there. So many people were calling me. They didn't want to build it themselves. They want instant gratification. I want it now. So my plant had been closed for 2 years. We had about 12 years on the road with all of that. And as I said, that's a whole nother story. Building lots of mixers, power amps. I had 35 people working in that plant. I closed it in 1980. It was dormant for 2 years. Well, I did this and I'm going, uh-oh. So I had to call back some of my better soldering gals, and we started building EQ200s. And it was a very simple box. It had an input gain, but I set the filters after. It took me a couple of years just playing around on 7240 each night with a couple of friends. A couple of them were really into audio. And we set this at 160 hertz, the bass. You could increase or decrease. We set the top one where? 4,000. So scientists told us, Fletcher-Munson told us 2.5K plus. Of course, you could minus it, but you didn't want to do that. Well, in 1999, I got a letter from Dr. Inouye Communications, ICOM. And he had a picture of his station. And he had one of my equalizers and his wonderful IC781. Remember, that was the first rig that the contesters really went crazy for. It was also the first rig that had a scope in it. It was an actual CRT. And so he said, I'm thinking of new radio and I want to use EQ 200. And he was just checking with me to see if he had the frequencies right and all that. He really didn't need me to tell me or ask me. He knew, but he just did it out of the kindness of his heart. He's a gracious man. And so from the Pro 1, Pro 2, Pro 3, all the way through the entire icon line, including this little guy, the latest in the ICOM lineup. What a deal. The 705. And he sent this to me so I could build a headset. They're not building a headset or microphone for it. And so we did that. We've got adapters for other mics coming for our ICM mics. And the new headset was really cool. This is an amazing little piece, and it has a push to talk line and all that. And that works great into the 705, as well as a number of handy talkies. And we have them for Kenwood and Yaesu and all that. But the thing is that those things are junk. They, you know, they don't sound good. And I said, no, if it's going to be something that we build here and it's got our name on it, it's going to be great. And it is. And it's $50. That was the other thing. Oh, did I get in trouble? Oh, did I get in trouble? Sarah owns the company. My director of operations says, you know, we're not making any money. I don't care. And I don't. We need this. We need to let people know that there's something a lot more than these little garbage things that we're paying $100 for. But we have all these things working. And the equalizer really has changed amateur radio. A year later, at Dayton, here comes Dr. Hasegawa. Dr. Hasegawa owns Yaesu. And he said, I want to do it better. I said, well, the only thing better would be a parametric. Yeah, that'd be good. Well, just not so fast. What'll be the problem? Education. Well, I mean, okay, with what we did for ICOM, you have two controls. I set the frequencies. All you do is plus or minus. And as I just showed you guys and gals a while ago, you have 9 controls. Plus band, you got to do the transmit bandwidth and the save button. No problem. Well, it was a problem. I look at the manuals for all the Yaesus and I go, what is this about? It's just a play. I don't understand them. And so I had to do something about it. And if you have been to my website, you want to do that. Under support is all things ICOM, all things Yaesu, all things Kenwood, Elecraft, so on. And we have, there's 50, 60 pages in there. And they have all of the things described for you. But it is very simple, as we saw in the with the ICOM. It's all simply laid out. The very first thing, listen to me, the very first thing you ever want to do to your radio when you sit down each day or night, figure out, what am I going to do? We're going to do Raichu. We're going to do contest. What are we doing? And you have to find the transmitter bandwidth. If you're going to do Raichu, you'll notice in that third dark line, it's going to be 100 to 2900. You can set these all kinds of different frequencies. That's a nice wide one. No, it's not excessive. But look at the equalizer. That bass, I set it at 160. You don't have to worry about it. So you're going to notch the bass -2. And you're going to plus the treble +3 or 4. Listen to the monitor. Even better than that, what you want to do there is you want to listen to yourself in another receiver with headphones. The other thing is, maybe you're a contester. What's the first thing you do? You set the bandwidth. And for this, we don't want that low end. It does nothing but muddy the signal and injures the articulation at 2.5. So we set it at 500 to 2,500. You go up and you take all the bass you can possibly notch out, and you put all the treble in, and bingo, all of a sudden you've got this great articulate audio. And it goes on. Here's the 7610. It's the same thing, just different graphics. Here's the 7850, 7851. And there was several of them during those years that had this same setup. Same thing, minus, plus, and so on. He also asked me to build a microphone because, you see, none of these companies build their own microphones. They have OEM companies. They paint it the same color. They stick it in a box. Everybody, oh, that's got to be matching. No. And they're really pretty terrible. They have no articulation. They have really awful plosives. And so we did it for him. This is an amazing microphone for $100. Nobody touches it. It only works on ICOM. We have others for Yaesu, Kenwood, but this was the start of me building microphones for amateur radio, and it was all about ICOM asking me to do this, and it's really wonderful. What do you do about Yaesu? Well, here's the way they lay that out. Now remember, there's 9 controls, and it's just simply frequency level width. The second one's frequency level width and frequency level width. The problem is you don't know where to set it. So what are you going to do? As I talk to so many guys on the air, they leave it in the default mode and I go crazy. I worked hard to get that in there. Don't leave it in the default mode. You have beautiful audio in front of you. Here's how you do it. All Yaesus are the same, every one of them, all the way through the new 101. Yes, they'll have different assignment numbers. That's why you noticed I've got them all kind of blurred out. We don't care about that. Here's what they are. There are 9 controls. The first one is looking for frequency. We're going to set it at 200. The second one is looking for level. We're going to notch it -3 or 4. I want to get rid of that bass. And how wide do you want it? We're going to do it at 2 octaves. And if you remember, we talked about that, where you can have it a little narrower, a little wider. No problem. And it's not a big worry. Just do as I'm saying here, set it for 2 or 3 wide and you'll be okay. You can play with it, but just get you in the ballpark. Second filter, where are you going to set it? In all my years, hundreds and hundreds of concerts, there's just something about rooms and audio. There's this boxy sound at 900. Take your hands on your ear and do this. That sound is about 900 and we want to get rid of it. And so that's how we do the second filter. 900 -3, 2 octaves. And if you've been listening, you know where we're going to put the third one. It's going to be 2.5K. Of course it is. +8. We want all we can have. Because here's the deal. And again, you're going to adjust this, but we're going to take another visit. All I'm doing here is taking out 2.5K. That's all I did. In other words, what we saw here on the Yaesu is you can notch it however you want. But when you notch it, listen to what happened. There's no articulation. And that's how I hear what I hear on amateur radio a lot. There's no articulation. As I start bringing it back up, you hear it just come like a flower. And that was only 2.5. You want a lot of bass? Okay, we'll give you bass. Now listen what happened. It covered it up. So now we don't want all that bass. Why do you want bass? You're not a DJ. We're not on radio. You need a little of it to balance. Balance is very simply a listening. Remember I told you earlier about listening. You have to learn to listen, dissect things. Let's roll that bass back a little bit, mix it with the 2.5K. How beautiful is that? Because you get really great articulation. And so these are the things that you have to learn about your radio. There's one last thing, and it's really important. On Yaesu, after you do all this, you have to save it. Push the memory button for a few seconds, because if you don't do that, none of this is activated and you're back to default, and you don't want to do that. So you have to do that. And the other thing that you want to look at is you want to check the bandwidth, as we did in the icon. You want to check the bandwidth, and you don't, and we're talking about transmitter bandwidth, and they have the same thing there where you can do it from, I usually like to go 2.9 on the top and about 200 on the bottom. And then you go with your parametric EQ, and you really have things working beautifully. It's kind of a graph that helps a lot of people understand it a little bit more, where we have low, mid, and high. And you can move those around because they're parametric. If you don't have parametric, you just have regular shelving that the engineers have set. And here's another thing to look at, and this is on our website. These kind of things. There's a chart that's a little easier to remember. It's 200 minus plus 4, so on, so on, so on. And this makes it a little simpler. And that's what I try to do with everybody to help them. Because you must have your audio adjusted right. The other thing you want to absolutely check is you want to check things like getting rid of all that low end, things that we talked about, but you want to get rid of how you use a microphone improperly. I hear guys that sound like this because they're a foot from the microphone or more. You can't do that. Well, you can, but you lose a lot of things. Plus you sound bad. You just sound bad. Here's the reason. And if you want to argue, well, you're going to have to argue with 4,000 scientists. Here's what I learned from them. Thank you, Paul Clips, for guiding me. Every time you double the distance of the microphone, you lose 6 dB. Now think about this. Now think about it. If you double your power, how many dB is that? It's 3. Well, you're going to lose 6. Think about it. Just by getting away from the microphone. And you're going to say, well, Heil, you're full of crap. All you got to do is turn up the gain. Okay, I'll do that. Well, when I do turn up the gain, it sounds like I am in a roller rink. It's awful. It's all echoey. And this is a studio that's very well tempered. The walls are very well tempered with a very special material that cut down some of that. But still, we've lost so much. We have lost dynamic range. We have lost some of the articulation. And so things just don't sound right when you're that far away from the microphone, no matter what. That's why I brought booms to this industry. When I got back in 1982, we were the first company to bring booms because I had them from my rock and roll sound days. And wow, I don't want to have to lean into a microphone. Although we make desk stands and they're okay, but you have to lean into them. You cannot do this. Well, you can, but you're not going to sound optimum. And that's what it just bugs me when all of that happens. The other things you have to worry about is a thing called plosives. Some people exhibit more air than others. And what happens is the breath from your mouth drives the diaphragm down against the voice coil. So when you say P's and B's, you get all of those plosives. They pop. There's two ways around it. Talk the microphone off to the side, and it works very fine with our microphone, not all, because I built my microphone so that it's 180 all around. Thank you, Joe Walsh. Some back years later, Joe says, you need to make a microphone. I don't have to be stuck right here, that ball thing. And so we have that so you can move around a little bit. But the other one, of course, all of our mics come with a very proper windscreen, and that gets rid of it. Now, all windscreens are not equal. You bought one, a $1 one at Kmart or Radio Shack, where you buy them. They're not acoustically transparent. These are. We spend a lot of money for these, and that's why I pack it no charge in the microphone. It's so important. And that's one of the things that I want people to understand, that we want to make sure you know about that. The distance from the microphone is very, very important. And all of these things, you don't hear about them, and it makes me sad, because you should be hearing about these things. And so I like to bring all this to the front so that you can make your signal better. And they're all there. You go to my website and you'll be able to see all things ICOM, all things Yaesu, things like that that really mean something are there for you. Things the manufacturers didn't care to produce. And then we get into the thing about actually using your radio. And I guess there's things you can talk about, but it's best to hear and see it. And that's all about RF gain. A lot of guys just leave RF gain wide open. No, don't do that. Well, then I won't hear the wikis. Oh, yes, you will. Check this out. The other thing about this is when you do this, you'll notice that it's very noisy. But when I reduce the RF gain and I get the AGC into slow, it sounds like an FM radio. Listen.
About new right now is really old technology that just kind of got forgotten, and somebody like Bob or anybody else would,
There goes the RF gain.
Yeah. Say, I wonder about this old stuff that we should do.
Slow AGC.
And apply it to a new application, and it works great. So
cranking it back up. Listen.
Very good. I love the technical abilities that come out of this hobby. The technician class was truly a technician class test. And, I like that part.
And these are things that I never see people talking about. And it's so important. It's so important. Just simple things of being able to use your microphone right. The other thing about what you want to look at is bandwidth. The radios all have bandwidth filters, and nothing's ever talked about. And it really bugs me. A lot of guys never hear the difference. You have a radio that has 2.5K wide, or they have 1.8. Well, you need to check about this. Here's how it sounds with the difference between 2.4 and 2.9. It is a big, big difference.
This is K9EID, and we're transmitting at 2.9K with. This is 2.4K, and as you note, it's nice and it's articulate, but the whole bottom end drops out because of the filter network. We'll go back to 2.9. Now this is the 2.9, and it's much smoother, has much more fidelity.
It's just a very simple thing. But again, a lot of guys, you've never heard yourself and you don't realize how different that filter is. Because if you don't do that filter right, then you're going to not be happy. And a lot of times I hear guys that some of the radios only go to 2.4 and they're trying to use one of our broadcast mics, a PR40 or something, that gets down to 28 cycles, which is very difficult to tame on ham radio. But they'll come to me and they'll say, your PR40 doesn't work. Why? Well, I'm using it on a 520 or a 570 or whatever. And its widest filter is 2.4. Well, of course it's not. The radio is cutting it off, as you just heard. And so you need to think about this, because you do these things and sometimes guys you're talking to don't realize what it is, but it's very important.
This is K9EID, and we're transmitting at 2.9K with. This is 2.4K.
No low end.
As you note, it's nice and it's articulate, but the whole bottom end drops out because of the filter network. We'll go back to 2.9. Now this is the 2.9, and it's much smoother, has much more fidelity.
And so those are some of the reasons that the guys will have trouble with the microphones not getting them to sound right. And it's kind of sad. But, we're constantly working on things. We've been the leader for 37 years for headsets for the amateur radio market as the expeditions and contesters worldwide have been using our stuff for all these years because it works. We build elements that roll off all that low end. Our HC4s and 5s, my gosh, now it's called an HC7, and they're miraculous because they take it all away automatically. Everything under about 500 is reduced. And look at that peak, and guess where it is? 2.5K. It's at plus 10. Why would I do that? If you've been listening tonight, you know why I did it. And they all love it. And that's been something we've done all these years. One of the things about all of our headsets, I see guys once in a while say, oh, that Heil headset hurts my ears. You didn't read your instructions. Every one of our headsets has a steel band in them. And you can adjust that steel band for what you need. If you have a pinhead like me, fine. If you have a wider head, you're not going to break it. Do it. And they all have that adjustment. And while I have the Pro 7 up here, this has been a miraculous piece. Took me a couple of years. I saw a couple of companies trying to copy David Clark, but they did a really crappy job. It didn't sound good and all that. So I called on the learning that I did from Paul Klipsch. When we built those thousands of speaker cabinets, he taught me how to take a speaker out in free air, take it outside and hang it. Measure the cone resonance. There's nothing going to affect it. Get that free air cone resonance. Then you build the cabinet at that frequency. So there's no phase distortion. The speaker doesn't move. It doesn't have to. It's very efficient. I did that here. No other headset in the world does it. That's why these sound so good. Why we get so many reports from the guys, especially the guys in contesters and guys that are using them forever each day. Notice the speaker sits back here. Look how far away it is from your ear. People with hearing aids love it, because if you take a hearing aid and put it in your ear and you take any other headset and it's up against your ear, it's going to feed back. So you can't use headsets. You can use this one all day long. I designed it like that. I also answered another quest. It has a balance control, left to right. So if you have a hearing imbalance, no problem. I also put another little jack in here. This is for your monitor. You don't need Y cables and all that. Just have the monitor plug in here. It's really great for field day too if you got people. But then about 12, 13 years ago, I really got into phasing. We're going to get into that in a minute here as we close. Phasing is an amazing thing about this hobby. I learned it from Paul Klipsch and those 4,000 scientists, by the way. We're the only headset in the world for all these years that have a phase reversal. You're going to say, what's that for? Well, ask the guys that are out in the D expeditions for many, 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 many hours. What happens? You're listening to a weak signal. A little weaky. You hear him way back here. You reverse the phase, you're moving up here. You can move things around in your head acoustically. It is absolutely amazing what you can do with a phase reversal and pick out weak signals, get rid of strong ones sometimes. And most all of our headsets have it. It's something to behold. And the Pro 7 has just gone crazy. It has interchangeable elements. We have it for broadcast. We have it for RAG2. We have it for DX. And we have one for an ICOM because the ICOM has that special one. And it's all there. Just brought out a new one called the BM17. It's a real lightweight. It works great into the 705. And really we have a dynamic that works well into all those. But then we're going to talk about phasing, my favorite subject. Wes Shum brought single sideband to ham radio in 1948. No, it wasn't Art Collins. If you were in a trivia contest, you'd probably lose it because you'd probably say, oh, it was Art. Nope, Art was 6 years late. He should have been there, but he wasn't. Wes Shum, how did he do it? How did he get rid of the carrier? He got rid of the carrier with phasing. As I said, it's my favorite subject. I have this incredible little demonstration that you will never forget. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug this microphone. Let me get this up here. Okay, let me do this. Okay, now we're going to plug in a pair. Built this neat little Y cord so I could do this. We're not playing games. There's the cord I had. Now we have a Y cord. They're both the same, so no big deal. We're not playing games here. They're a pair of PR22s that I built at the invitation of Paul Rogers from Bad Company. Said, I need a microphone and I move around and I don't lose myself, but I want to get rid of all those people behind me. And I love the PR22. I use it on my ham radio a lot. If you were running 500 watts, you didn't know about and you didn't care about equalization. So I'm going to go get a kilowatt. I'm not making the pileups. I got the wrong microphone. What can I do? And so you're going to double your power, right? 500 to a kilowatt. Now I got it, buddy. I'm running a kilowatt. How many decibels does it get you? 3. That's it. 3. No way you can argue with this. It's the science of it. If I double my power, it's 3 dB. When I bring this microphone up here, you can maybe see it on the loudness meter over my shoulder. It's hard to see because there's only 3 dB. Here we go. See if you can hear double your power. 1, 2, 3. Remember what I talked about earlier, listening, so important. Close your eyes. I want everybody to do that. I can see you, so no games here. Close your eyes. I'm going to take away 3 dB, which could have been that kilowatt amp that cost you $2,000. Here we go. See if you can hear that double your power go away. 1, 2, 3. No, let's do it again. 1, 2, 3. The human being cannot detect 3 dB. Whoa. Think about that. I have a little plug here. I'm going to plug in here. This little plug backwards. Pin 3 is hooked to 2 and 2 is hooked to 3. Well, big deal. Let me get this. Big deal, Heil. What, I mean, what's the deal? Still works just fine. Yeah, but when I talk into this one, the diaphragm goes down. When I talk to this one that's out of phase, it comes up. What happens when you have 2 signals out of phase? Watch the screen and listen. They cancel. Nothing. Now, if we had about another 2 hours, we'd really get into this, but I'm going to take you on a little trip about things. Let me unplug and get to you one. Now's when it gets really good. My favorite subject. How did Wes Shum get rid of the carrier? Of course he did. The other carrier, the carrier, the signal's out of phase. Goodbye, hello. How did he get rid of the other sideband? Well, it's out of phase. How does the notch filter work when some idiot piles on top of your conversation and he doesn't care and he's gone when you push that button? How's that button work? He takes his signal out of phase. Goodbye, you're gone. How did Dr. Yagi, how did he do that? He built a Yagi antenna with no equipment. How does noise canceling headphones work? How do equalization filters work? How did I get 40 dB of rejection out of PR40? Well, here's how Dr. Yagi did it. He had no equipment. He didn't have modeling and all that. He had a bunch of aluminum and he had a field strength meter. He built a driven element, and that driven element was the key. He got that on a boom, and the boom, right in the middle, had room to play. Took all these different pieces of aluminum and he went out so far, so long, halfway from what he had. Whoa, he could, wait a minute, I can get gain. No batteries needed. Yeah, all right. But if he went behind the driven and made it longer in the right place, the right length, he could get rejection because it was out of phase from the front. Wow. Oh. I always have wanted to build a phased array. I never really studied it until about 10 years ago. I started working on, whoa, wait a minute. This isn't as hard as I thought. Didn't take a lot of space. Put 2 telephone poles up, went down to the Co-op Electric, and they gave them to me. Because you see, they have a lot of like 90-foot poles that rot off or get broken off from car wrecks or whatever. They'll give them to you if you go down there. They won't get rid of them. Can't use them. So I got a pair of 60-footers and I put them 60 foot apart. And here we have a down lead length of 213. Got to make sure it's 0.66 velocity factor. The velocity factor means how fast is it going to go down through that coax. If it's more or less, it takes more time. Phasing is all about time. But I took these 2 lead lengths and we put up these 2 dipoles on 75 meters and they're 64 foot apart, 64 foot high. Now, look how I hooked them together. Isn't that kind of crazy? They're all hooked together, but there's this delay line of 43 foot. When I took the remote relay, these things were 500 feet from the shack. When I move it to the left, I'm feeding the left antenna. That's my driven. The reflector is delayed. And it gave me, got that rear ejection. Then I could switch it the other way. Did it work? You tell me. Check this out. This is an amazing piece of gear, and I really thoroughly enjoyed building it. Here we go. We have just completed the installation of a 75-meter phased array antenna system, consisting of a pair of coaxial dipoles mounted atop a pair of 55-foot telephone poles. We put them in an inverted V fashion, and the poles are 64 foot apart. These are 500 foot from the operating position, fed with RG213. In order to make the antennas directly from east to west, we use a delay line of 43 foot here on 75 meters that's switched in and out of the driven element, either east or west. The downlead length is 126 foot. We take all of that coax, the downlead length, the 43 foot phasing delay line, and mounted them in a container, one of the plastic container boxes that we actually buried, and just the top of it shows. It's all sealed, so it's waterproof. But that's the way we get to switch all the components from 500 foot using one of the Amatron RCS 8V remote switches. It really works well. Take a listen to how we can get at least 10 to 20 dB difference east to west.
Like a lot of people do. Mine's usually 3 inches or so. That's just after you done mow it. And I know, probably, we get a dry day. I'm going to have to lay out there and mow. That's just all there is to it, because, if you leave it that high, when it starts growing in it all, it's looking ragged pretty quick. So it's to that point now, and
the system really performs on weak signals. Take a listen as we switch to the direction they're coming from. Also note the preamplifier makes no difference on 75 meters on this signal. The preamp will, of course, make the meter read higher, but in many cases, the preamplifier does not cause the weak signal to be more readable. Check it out.
Yeah, well, I see they introduced boy on it, and that is their form of portable. That is your wife.
As we talked about earlier, that preamp makes no difference. Oh, if you took it down far enough, but just get rid of that background noise. Bingo. But I think you, I think you learn how important phased arrays can be. I put them up so I can talk to my buddies on the West Coast on 75 meter AM, and it works because I can get rid of everything from the east. But if I want to talk to the east, I can get rid of the west. It's a simple thing. I used a Maritron switching boxes to do that remote relay, but I don't like rotary switches. I also had a DX Engineering, and they make great relays, either company, but I got rid of the rotary. I hate it. So I went to Antique Electric Supply and I bought some Les Paul guitar switches. I put them in a panel, and I can press one. That brought up my east side 75, west side 75, same thing. It really works great. I have them behind me. You'll see they switch all the radios and the antennas. The antennas on the left are all Les Paul's guitar switches for the antennas. and the colored ones are for the different radios. There's 35 relays in this thing behind me. And I just love playing with this stuff. One of the things I did in my last few years on Ham Nation was get people to build. That was so important. And I figured, why not do it the way I learned? So we started building the Pine Board project. This went on for about 1.5 years. We know over 1,000 people built it. How do you know that, Heil? Because Antique Electric Supply have the kits for it. You can call them and buy a Pine Board power supply. In the middle with the purple knobs is the microphone equalizer and preamp with a 12AX7. And on the right, that's a final amplifier, a transmitter for 40 and 75 meters. And there it is all put together. And what really made it play was Gene, W4IQN. He was a graphic artist for General Motors. Look at those diagrams. I was so impressed. When I first started it, I was trying to do these myself. Oh my gosh, it was terrible. And he sent me a nice note and said, I think I can help you. Did he ever? Because it was a success of this project, because you didn't have to read schematics. Get yourself a piece of pine board or plywood or whatever, and bingo, you're there. And it was so easy. Well, I wrote an article for QST and they went bunkers, because this is the kind of thing we needed in ham radio. And it was so simple. And so it was their lead article, January 19th, 2019, and got the cover shot. In the beginning of it, I had a lot of guys, a few guys come in. Hey, you're going to electrocute something. You're stupid, Heil. No, we taught at the beginning of each one of the shows, we taught them how to respect high voltage. That's what you do. So that was a great project, and it's still going on. You go to my website, you can get all, gosh, there must be 60, 70 pages, and I don't know how much in the chat room, heilsound.com. And, it's wonderful. I work them on the air. I'm on the air each morning from 9 until about 10:30 or 11. And every once in a while, we have guys jump in with their pine board. It's really fun. It really is fun. Well, in closing, I had one other gripe about this hobby. I work for the guys. I understand this. I'm on the inside. And I'm keep saying, why don't you do something about the receiver? Receiver, fine. They're talking sensitivity, selectivity. I'm talking about audio. It's terrible. No, it's just fine. $15,000 receivers have maybe 2 watts. Most of them's 1. And a little junky 3-inch speaker. The amplifier for it has 10% distortion. Trust me on this. Measure it if you don't believe me. It drives me crazy because I can't stand distortion, and neither can you, but you don't identify it as that. It's covered up by noise. So I did something about it since they weren't going to do it. The first thing I had to do is build a speaker. Well, Heil, they all build speakers, matching speaker. Yeah, that same little junky speaker put in a box, painted the same color, charge you $150 for it, driven by that 1 or 2 watt, 10% amplifier. Are you out of your mind? Come on. We have to do something about it. So I did. See, it's okay if you beat up on somebody, but you better have an answer. And boy, do I have an answer. Thank you, Paul Klipsch. He taught me how to build speaker cabinets. Big ones, but here's kind of a small one. Look at the size of that magnet on those speakers as we're assembling these. You take it out into free air, as I told you with the headphone speaker. Find out what the cone resonance is, and then treat the inside of that cabinet. See, that's the kicker. You have to be able to go in and treat that cabinet so there's no distortion. There's no phase distortion. That's the key. The amplifier on the back is driven through XLR, 3-pin balanced audio, as we do in all broadcast and recording studios. Why can't ham radio have that? Well, now they do. And the amplifier, it's 25 watts. 25. You're going to say, why so much? Because I have plenty of headroom. And it's at 25 watts, 0.1%, 0.1, 0.1. My gosh, that's hi-fi level. So what do you do with the rest of it? Well, what you do with the rest of it is you build the equalizer. And what we did was built this wonderful little box. Took me a couple of years to do this. It has input level. It has 3 filters. The high filters is just good old shelving, plus or minus. It's set. The high filter is set at 6K, plus or minus 12 dB. Booster cut. The low filter's at 160 hertz. Or have you heard that before? Get rid of that low end. So we're going to notch that. But I'm going to leave these all up. The important one is the mid. The mid is a parametric. This is the gain of the filter. We'll set that right there. But this one is not set by me. It's set by you. It goes from 400, there's 1,000, up to 4K. But when you start rotating this and you pass that 2.5, it's just like somebody grabs you and says, wow. I have a very, very great demonstration. Recorded this. Oh, that's another thing I should tell you. There's a record out. That is not a Y chord off of anything. It's a separate low distortion amplifier that can drive your computer or recorder or whatever. And the other two, most important, 2 headphone amps. They're not wide off of anything. They have their own low distortion amplifiers. So you can have a logger and you can have an operator. Or you can put the left side speaker here and the right side speaker there. And if you have a hearing imbalance, you dial up what you want. I cannot tell you how many of these are being sold for that very function. We're giving people back their radio. Hundreds of these have been sold to television. You know, television audio is terrible. Not anymore. We fixed it. Listen to this DX station, what we can do to him. It's amazing.
Hey, Ethan. Grab back your copy.
That's a D10. Here he comes. There he is flat, the way you hear him.
Echo India A Bravo Lima Bravo EIATLB calling.
Go back flat, the way you hear him now.
We have a Germany. Hope I have it right. From Ireland. India Alpha Mike over.
This flat.
Echo India A Bravo Lima Bravo EIATLB calling about.
Here are a couple of usual single sideband signals that are mushy and bassy, difficult to understand. So you can add some speech articulation just by adding some 2.5 mid-range.
The 2 meter, sideband, but they're just not, it's not the same as a rig built, just
it is the way you hear it.
Sideband. The receivers will never compare. So it's kind of nice that, again, ICOM technology.
There's no argument. This is an amazing product. And there's nothing like it. There's a couple little dinkies out there, but no, nothing that has all the things that I've worked so hard to make sound good, because you boys and girls asked me to do this. I work with people giving me ideas, and then I can build it. That's what I do in this. This is a station lab. Yeah, I get on the air occasionally over here on sideband in the morning. I do my AM thing, but I'm constantly working on things. Here's how it happens. You're going to laugh at this, but here's a new product right here. And you guys say, what is that? That's an adapter for the 705 for a desk microphone. So it won't look like that. In fact, oh, here's where's it at? Here it is. This is one of the finished products for the headphone. It's got a push to talk switch and all of that. And that's out there. So these are things that I learned from you. And I thank all of you for your ideas, because we need to work together, because the manufacturers, they don't want to talk to you. They really don't. And so we want to do things right. Last but not least, I have something that's dear to my heart. And you're going to say, you got to be kidding me. And that is connectors. What? Connectors. Since 1963 or so, when the CB craze started, a company called Foster came out with that connector. The cable clamp never worked. You always had to put heat shrink around it or black tape, and that falls out after a period of time. While I'm here, notice that red wire? I help guys fix an awful lot of RFI. You see none, zero, none of these radios, $15,000 to $100. They don't ground their shield. Isn't that the first thing you learn when you're building things? The shield's floating. Not all the time, but a lot of times you can stop the RFI by adding. You don't take anything apart. You add that to the shield pin, pin 7 here in that case, wrap it around the cable collector when you get it all put back together. And you have grounded the shield by the ring. But I don't like that connector. It's a little bitty guy. So I built the stealth connector. I had to get a release of the patent from Foster, which we did. And you'll notice how nice the ring is. That's a recessed input on that 2000. It's always hard. That's something I had to use needle nose. Not anymore. And the cable clamps fit our cable. We make our own cable. The cable clamp is made to fit it. And when you clamp it down, you could tow your car with it. I mean, it's really strong. But there's 2 of them. There's a little one. And what do you do that for? That's for a push to talk line that's coming out of the radio. And so there's the things that, you know, I wanted to do, and I did. Wire. Oh my gosh. Wire is a joke. Every piece of microphone wire you have in these manufacturers use 24 to 26 gauge. My gosh, what are they thinking? I just don't understand it. Their shields are terrible. Here you're looking at 18 gauge wire, and I put 2 of them inside the shield for balanced line audio, because most all of our microphones are balanced line to get rid of that RFI. And what's the blue and the red? That's push to talk. The manufacturers building your microphones for the matching microphones, they put it all inside one shield. You got that horrendous DC coming down right up next to the sensitive AC. No wonder we have RFI problems. That solves it. And we have it in all different links. We have a lot of manufacturers buying this, broadcasters and stuff like that. Much of this is in this book, plus a whole lot more. If you don't have it, you might want to take a look at it. I wrote this book, but I didn't write it. I compiled this book from things I learned from my early Elmers. My early Elmer, the second week I was a ham, was K0DGE. He was a chief engineer for KMOX CBS radio. He taught me so much. And a lot of it is in that book about antennas, hooking up your rigs, grounding, all that kind of good stuff. A lot of clubs are buying those by the cases and giving them to people they're giving tests to. You can go to our website and download this. It all starts the microphone. Really great information. And last but not least, we were very blessed some years back. We're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We're the only manufacturer in the Rock Hall. All the things we did. I'm standing in front of the quadrophenia console. That's the first and only quadraphonic audio console that we did for Pete Townsend and the Who. we were with him for 6 years, and he wanted a system that he could move Roger's voice around an arena, and that's what we did. It. That's one of the monitors there in the back. You'll see a ZZ Top's mixer. The talk box is there. Didn't get into all that. The talk box is really something for Frampton and Walsh. And I was just awarded an honorary PhD from Mizzou University. And it's all of these things that I never dreamed that it could come to me, but it did, and it came through amateur radio. And I'm very, very blessed that I get to have this time with so many of you, because it's not out there. I try to find it, but it's not. And I sure hope that it's helped you. And I don't want it to be the last. We have so many things we can talk about. I come back 2 and 3 times to some of the clubs because they say, hey, we want to talk about just antennas. Yeah, what is Pete Townsend really like? And all that kind of stuff. So we got to have some questions. I will have some answers. I don't know if they'll be right, but surely we'll have some question and answers, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely, Bob. I'm just amazed at all the stuff you went over tonight, and it's just amazing to have the opportunity to pick your brain for a few minutes. You were talking about phasing. We built a 20 and 40 meter triangle 3-element array, phased array for field day this year. So we only had the opportunity to bring the 40 online because the 20 we didn't have long enough control cable. We had two elements in phase and 1 element 71 degrees lagging, and we were able to switch that through a bunch of relays. So it was an amazing antenna. We absolutely just stormed it. So, but anybody, if you have any questions, please raise your hand and we'll get to you as quickly as possible we can. All right, we got one question. Let's see, who is that? Go ahead and unmute yourself if you have. Is that
Mr.
Andre?
Darcy. It's Mr.
Oh, Darcy, go ahead.
Hey, Bob. Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm on a Heil headset. You inspired me to get out my Yaesu manual for my 950 here. And the question I guess I have is for somebody like just starting out with some of these settings, is it more, do you think it's more important on the listening side or on the transmitting side?
Oh, no, the transmitter. Oh, my gosh, yes. I mean, here, if you didn't have the equalizer and you didn't pay attention to it, how would you like to listen to me all night sounding like this? That's what your Yaesu sounds like in the default mode. I'm not making this up. I designed this. I know what it does without it. Now, the 950 is kind of my favorite. Let me get this back up here. The 950 is kind of my favorite. You go to my website and find all things like Yaesu and find the 950 pages. There's a lot of them. And all of them are the same, even the 101, the brand new one. All of the filters are the same. I know, I designed them. They just have different assignment numbers. Well, you don't care about the assignment numbers. It's just, as we went through a while ago, it's the frequency, the level, plus or minus, and the bandwidth. Do that 3 times. And the 950 has some other things with it. The fellow from Canada wrote some things, and I published a whole thing in there. It's really good. So if you have any problems, don't be afraid. Send me an email. Call me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for everything you do for ham radio. And yeah, it's really interesting to get your perspective that the manufacturers don't really care. They don't put a lot of thought into it. So yeah, it's awesome. Thank you very much for doing the presentation.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? I know somebody's got a question out there.
Somebody's got
Well, okay. I'll ask another one since, or somebody else going to ask one.
Andre, do you have something?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Andre.
Bob, it's an honor to talk to you. I have a couple of questions. Well, I used to build speakers when I was a teenager, and we experimented a lot with phase inversion techniques with building different ports, and I learned quite a bit. And I've always been picky about good sound. transmitted or received. And it's just amazing to notice how many hams don't pay much attention to their audio quality. And they may be putting an S9 plus 10 signal, but it's very hard to understand what they're saying. And I'm guilty myself. I'm just using a cheap Sony right now, so I apologize. But on the radio, it's very important. And I keep repeating over and over that even with the low power, but if you have a quality signal, I can hear you much better than somebody who's 20 over S9. It's very important.
Yes.
And
I
my
mean,
question was,
go ahead.
I've heard from quite a few people that when ICOM designed their IC 7300s, that they were involved with you guys to design their microphone element, and they used the Heil microphone element. Is this true or not?
No, we never did anything with, they used the thing in their stock. It wasn't anything great. What they did do is ask me to build the ICM.
Okay.
So yeah, that gets confused. The ICM is our product and it's incredible. I love this microphone and it's not very expensive. We made sure of that because we had some tooling, and tooling always costs a lot of money. I mean, if we started out to build a microphone today, you're going to probably talk $20,000 to start for the tooling. But we had some other tooling for some of our other broadcast things that we do. And so we were able to use that handle and we didn't have to worry about any kind of extra dollars for tooling. That's why it doesn't cost a lot. And it's just really cool. We had to mold the little stand for the element that sits up here. We even put there we go, put a acoustic filter on it. This is one incredible microphone. It only works for ICOM, but oh buddy, it is the answer. That's why I call it ICM. Almost spells ICOM, doesn't it? It's great.
And that rolls into my next question. What's the difference as far as quality of sound and settings when we talk about condenser type microphones and dynamic type microphones? How do you differentiate it as far as applications and how to set up audio settings?
You never, ever want to use a condenser. They're a scourge of the earth. Why?
Really?
They're a scourge. Why? They are way too sensitive. They pick up every little flea in the room. You got to have 48 volts to drive them. And I don't know why these people building the $5,000 ones, every single one of them, you go listen to one. Now that I've pointed out to you, remember what I said about listening, dissect what you're hearing. There's something about, there's this raspy top end in all of them. Why do they not get rid of that? I don't understand it. And so that's the thing that drove me to building a decent dynamic microphone, and especially for ham radio. It's way too sensitive. But these guys go out, I've been on the internet and I got one for the $20. Well, but it's a condenser. It just tells me you need some help because condenser microphones should never be here. But not a lot of people know how to build a dynamic. And I have proof from so many people. Carrie Underwood, I don't know how many years we work with Carrie. The late Charlie Daniels, 15 years. We built Charlie a special microphone. We have a custom shop in our plant. Look at this. Is that beautiful? He's a true American. And this is one of our PR35s that we built for him. And I saw that. I said, you guys got to build me one of those too. But we do things because they should be done at the manufacturers. They don't care. And oh boy, their magic word, the condenser. Not for me. Our PR37, our PR30, I have orchestras that finally figured it out using our PR30s for concert organ orchestras because it's really good and it's not artificial. Condensers are artificial. I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you, Bob. You're
Yeah.
a legend, and
Sure.
I could talk to you for many hours, but thank you for your time and excellent presentation.
Let me do, hang on just a minute.
Great questions, Andre. Anybody else have a question coming up?
Yeah, I've got a technical question for Bob.
Okay, let's let him say what he's
What you
going to say. What you got, James?
Bob, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you and listen to your history and your experience. And again, as the others have said, I could listen to you all evening. It's very, very impressive. I've got a couple of your mics, and I can't remember the numbers to all of them, a couple of the booms. But one of the mics I bought, it's my first one, Heil mic I bought, it was a PL77D, I think is in Delta.
Mm-hmm.
Hooked to a boom, and it's hooked to a Yaesu 991 Alpha. And when it's got a switch on it, which is music or voice. And when I first hooked it up, in the voice selection, I was getting reports of a small hum in the background. When I switched to music, they said everything was clear. So I started reading your website and talking about balanced and unbalanced mics and things like that, and adding the wire there. And I tried it. I followed everything. Ultimately, sent the microphone back to Heil. Came back, and it was exactly the same. So I sent it back again, and then they sent me a new mic, and it's still the same thing today. So I just leave the switch in the music position. Everybody says my audio sounds, well, they say it sounds okay. So I just wondered, had any ideas why that mic would hum?
I've never heard that one. And as you saw, hello, I've got a couple of them here.
Yeah, I saw that when you started.
And I use them on all kinds of things, and I've never had that problem. I don't know. I might have to research that with the 991. I don't have a 91 here. Probably should get it, see what they're doing.
Yeah, it's the 991 Alpha, but yeah, just working with with your people and followed all the recommendations. Just never got, and it's not like it's terrible, but they just said you can really hear it in the background there, or you can detect in the background. If I go over the music, they say it's gone. So
well, you should have it in the music anyway. You know why? Because that's the nice full range bandwidth of that mic element.
Yeah.
Anything you want to do from there, do it with your transmitter. I never like to narrow things down at the microphone unless we're doing the contest stuff. But no, I always use it in the music side.
And I've got the radio set up with your recommendations from the website and everything. So I always get good reports back. Anyway, again, it was a pleasure talking to you and listening to you, and wish you the very best. Thanks very much, Bob.
Thank you. Any other questions like that, you just email us. Let us know. You probably talked to Donna, my service
Yes,
manager.
that's it.
She's something else. Been with me 26 years.
All right, we have anybody else have a question? Well, Bob, I just purchased the FTDX 10, and I'm getting ready to set it up. I'm waiting for the. I actually have the cable now sitting here that'll attach from a back of a I+ microphone switch to go from my 781 into the radio. So I assume the snapshot I took of the settings you had for the Yaesu will work just fine for what I'm doing.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Anybody else have a question?
Go to the website.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, this is Darcy again. Two things. One, SDRs and SDR receivers. Been playing around with this for satellites and aircraft, and just trying to get into a little bit of just listening with the SDR, just purely. Forget the radio for a second, just the SDR. Maybe talk a little bit about that, and also maybe like what's next. What do we see sort of trend wise in amateur radio and radios, and from your perspective, you kind of banged on the manufacturers, but what's the next big thing that you see coming?
I don't really know. I don't know. I'm busy with my own stuff, but I can tell you this for your SDR. If you don't have this, all of you, if you're hearing me, you need this product. I'm telling you, not because it's mine. That's why I built it, because I had a lot of reports from people, requests, I guess is the word. And I did it. And you're just going to fall in love because it makes a whole new receiver out of anything, especially the SDR stuff. But it's really neat. And the headphone amps in it are just incredible. So you might want to check that out for your SDR.
Well, Bob gave me a presentation on that thing personally at Dayton a few years ago. And I can tell you that PRAS system is amazing. I'm actually looking at getting one for my shack here shortly.
Yeah.
I think it'll beat my parametric equalizer and this Behringer mixer I have. Anybody else have a question?
One more question. If it's okay.
Yeah. I got it.
Go ahead, Andre.
This is Andre, W3PAL. Bob, you mentioned that you work with a Paul Clips or Clips. What's the right pronunciation? Clips, I guess. I've always been impressed with the speakers that were built by Clips here in the US, especially in the 80s, early 80s, mid 80s. And what I really like about the products is the mid-range and the clarity that they achieve by using the folded horn or just a regular horn speaker for the mid-range. Have you guys considered doing something like this for your products, duplicating or creating
For
something
ham
similar?
radio?
Yeah.
I've done it.
You've done it?
It's Paul Clips written all over that speaker. Got a
Really?
3.5-inch titanium tweeter, 5-inch woofer. And this speakers it took me a long time to find a manufacturer that would help me with that speaker. And of course the amplifier it's gorgeous. Very, very low distortion. It's 25 watts, plenty of headroom. And it's something that really, really works.
I got to spend money again. Thank you, Bob.
Like
Who
the
else
old
had-
drunk said, I spill more than that.
Another question. You hearing me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, this is NT4RT. I've noticed that the crystal filters that come in radios, and I built the Elecraft K2 where you've got the wider carrier frequency relative to the filter and that.
Yeah.
But I've noticed the filters all have ripple in them, and it seems to be necessary to get good selectivity to have a little ripple in the filter. But it seems like that would not do the best thing for audio response. Your comments?
I don't know because I've never had any work with it. So I really wouldn't be one to talk about it. I don't know. I couldn't help you there. I don't know.
Well, the filter, because of its ripple, it's going to show up in the SSB audio response. So your response is going to go, kind of rippling up and down with frequency a couple dB. And wondering how bad that is, and should we be putting effort towards getting filters that are perfectly flat because it directly translates into audio response?
Yeah. You ever talked to Eric or Wayne about that? The guys that own Elecraft?
Yeah, no, I actually haven't talked with them about that, but I was, they doing
That
it
would be-
more of a general
that would be my
question
first
because you have, the crystal filters in all radios seem to have some ripple in them. There, I think Chebyshev responses typically instead of a Butterworth. It seems like a Butterworth would be better.
Yeah. Well, as I said, not my bailiwick, so I can't really help you there. Whatever they build, we use, but I've never had that much of a problem with them. But yeah, you might want to have a conversation. They're really good about that. Either Wayne or Eric. Great guys, great company.
Thanks.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions for Bob?
Yeah, I've got one question. This is Jim again. For the 77D and the 781, do you recommend the windsocks for those microphones or not?
I do.
And do you sell? Does Heil actually sell the windsock for those two mics?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
It fits the PR40 and it fits over the.
Okay, I'll look into that.
Yeah, works great.
Appreciate it.
The broadcast industries went crazy. Sirius Radio just tossed all their RE20s and bought 250 PR40s. Wonder why. You know, let me something I didn't do.
You drop it to RE20 and see what happens.
You get rid
Show
of
you
the Omnia processor Sirius XM has. That would help.
Let me show you something. Oh, I forgot to do this for you. This is another Joe Walsh. We sat at his kitchen table and came up with this idea. First of all, it had to be this. The broadcasters love it. They don't have to be stuck right here. They can move around while they're looking at their computers or whatever, right? Watch the screen and listen. You're never going to see it or hear it on any other microphone. 40 decibel down. Here it goes. Oh, it still works. But it's 40 down. No other microphone will do that. And it gets down to 28 cycles, far below what an RE20 did. The RE20 was designed in 1965 by Al Kahn, good guy, but they didn't do anything about it. Oh, I'm sorry. A few years back, they are now built in China, which just irks me. But anyway, and the broadcasters know this because it's not the same. This one blows everything out of the water, and I'm really excited. I didn't touch any of the equalizer, but you notice how much fuller this is. 1.5 inch diaphragm. And it's just wonderful because we're able to get 40 dB down. That's incredible. I love it. PR40.
I am a fan of the PR40.
Brad, do you have any questions?
No, I just reiterating. I mean, when I built the studio at the Epicenter, I bought PR40s for all of it, and we were just playing around. Damn, 528Es. And it's like, let's just put it flat. And I listened to it and I said, all this thing needs is a little bit of compression and walk away. That is it. I've even had other people, Cookie over there at Wheatstone, was setting up M1s and M4s mic processors. He says, if you're just going to buy a microphone, buy the PR40 preamp. That's really all you need.
Yeah, thank
and
you.
that for that is, yeah, especially for the money.
I don't know if you can see it, but there's my 52080 over there.
I got a
come out
couple.
of the, I come out of the PR40 into that, up into my transmitters. It's wonderful.
That's what I use.
Don't need much.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have anybody else have any questions?
This has been fun. I'm so happy to be here. Very honored and be glad to come back and dig into something else.
Absolutely, Bob. I got one more question for you. I had one of the club members who couldn't join us tonight, and he asked me 3 times to make sure I asked this question. So I don't know if it's loaded or not, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. Why is purple your favorite color?
Well, that's an interesting thing. There is a reason, and it started way back in the 60s, actually. But I've always been, I dropped it when I got out of the rock and roll business. I got 12 years behind me in 1980. And I didn't got into ham radio, but all of a sudden, back when we started up, thank you very much, Joe, in 2006, he wanted me to build some microphones for him, and we got the 40 and all that. And all of a sudden, some of the guys have been around asking about purple. And I thought, you know what? Let's find out if anybody knows or remembers. So I'm being a real jerk. I'm kind of waiting for that person. Maybe we'll give them a couple of microphones or whatever. But there's a reason for it. And it has nothing to do with Jimi Hendrix and Purple Haze.
It's got to be Deep Purple.
No, we did them too.
Okay. Well, I know you pretty much did all the audio for almost all the major bands in the 70s and the 80s. So, but thank you so much for joining us this evening. And again, thank you so much for your generous donation to the Hamfest. You gave us one of your handbooks and one of the foot pedals, and we're going to use those for prizes and some T-shirts and some other things. So it was very kind of you to do that, and very kind of you to spend some time with us tonight. You are a living legend, and thank you for all your contributions to ham radio. I run almost exclusively all Heil gear. I do have one set of Sennheiser headsets that I use, and other than that, everything I own is Heil gear. So thank you so much for being here and for all you do. And if we can help you in any way, please let us know.
Okay, I will do that. I'm going to give you a choice. This is how I usually go out of these things. You can turn off my Zoom right now, or I'm going to walk about 20 feet in front of me and I'll play a little tune for about 2 minutes.
Oh, you play a tune for us. That'd be awesome.
Okay.
I think everybody enjoy that.
Yes, please do.
Look at that organ. Holy smokes. That's got more switches than my shack.
Yeah, there's about 300 of them in there.
Is that the B3?
This is how I started my life. I was 15 years old and started playing at the incredible Fox Theater in St. Louis. I was so blessed that Stan Can, who was the organist there and quite a celebrity in the organ world, he picked me up to do his substitute work. And I was just a young whippersnapper. There I was at the Fox, and tuning all of these great pipes taught me how to listen. And that's an important thing. So thanks a lot, everybody. We'll do some more later on, but I'll take a couple more minutes, but you can turn me off whenever you want. It's been fun.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it.
How cool.
This is awesome.
You give me $1,000 and ask me which identify one of the buttons, I wouldn't be able to.
And here he goes. Thank you, Bob. We do appreciate it. Have a good evening to you, 73, my friend.